Oh, hello there. Ivan Wayne here of The More You NoCo, a podcast about the people and ideas around northern Colorado. Today, our guest is none other than Amanda Jacobs. She is a legit, real title here, data scientist for an online school, the biggest online school here in Colorado. If you'd like to hear what the heck a data scientist does for an online school, or if you want to hear two people reflect on life as a journey through time and wonder about our various mistakes in life, stay tuned. We'll get into that and much more in today's episode. Let's go! And here we are. I sit here with Amanda Jacobs, data scientist at Goal Academy, school located here in Colorado. We'll get into that in a minute. Also, a PhD student at UNC, same program as myself. So cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you. We sit here in the home of Amanda. She invited me in and supplied me with a beer, so already a podcast going very well, in my opinion.
Yes.
So, actually I haven't even mentioned it yet, but the first thing I want to jump into is your photography.
Okay.
So, I was at a Crabtree anniversary party.
Yeah.
I ran into you, so I was in Greeley. For those who don't know, Crabtree is a brewery here in town.
Delicious brewery.
It was very good. Great space, especially the outside.
It is, yes.
Yeah. And they also have Monday night specials for grad students.
Do they? What is it?
Meaning, it's like half price for, I think, something like that, if you're working.
Not bad.
So, yeah, we need to get in there. But at this anniversary party, I run into Amanda, and she says, you should go over here because a lot of my photography is on the wall at this anniversary party. And I was blown away. I knew you had dabbled in photography.
Yeah. Did you like what you saw?
I did. Unfortunately, on a graduate student budget, wasn't able to purchase anything.
Yes.
But where does photography come in your life, and how'd you start?
I feel I've always been a somewhat creative person. So I've always wanted some kind of artistic outlet. And for several years, I did pottery. I would spin and hand build, but that takes a lot of time and effort and energy, and you have to go places, and you have to really invest a lot of time into it. And as a grad student, there's not a lot of time for anything. So photography, I figured, is a way for me to be creative still, but have more time, because I can take pictures in my backyard, in my house. I can upload them to the computer whenever, and I'm always sitting in front of a computer. So, it's just a way for me to be creative, I think. And I really like composing photos. I think that's one of the most interesting things about photography, is what kind of compositions a person can get within a frame. I don't do portraiture. I don't photograph people. I consider it a public service that I don't, because I'm terrible at it. But I've had a lot of people ask, come take pictures at my wedding or my children. And I'm always willing to give it a try. I'm, always willing to learn, but I also warn them that that's not really my forte. I prefer still lifes, landscapes, macro photography. I'm really into. I bought a nice macro lens that I've had a lot of fun with. So
for us lay people, what is a macro?
So a macro photography, macro lens is a way of just taking photographs of things very closely, get a lot of detail, get kind of microscopic, it looks like. Okay. In fact, a lot of people confuse the term macro with micro. It looks micro, but the term is macro. So there's actually a really cool garden orb spider that has made his home in the backyard on the deck, that he comes out at night, and he's got this beautiful web that has really been conducive to macro photography for me this summer. It's been kind of exciting to photograph this particular spider over the summer. So.
That's cool. And the type of spider is a glass orb? Or
a garden orb.
Garden orb?
Yeah, we'll have to go out and look at it. He's got the hugest butt, just this huge butt, little tiny head, and all these eggs. And the legs are really, really hairy, and he's gigantic. He's really interesting. Yeah.
That's neat. Yeah. You said you are interested in the composition of photos. Is that just like intentionally thinking about what's in the frame?
Yes.
Okay.
And does it convey a meaning that I want in some respect? And I think that's a higher level of artistry than I function at most of the time. what is the meaning of this photo?
Right. You're just out there snapping.
Yeah. I like the composition. I like, the rule of thirds with the points in the middle and, trying to get a even composition that's balanced and pleasing to the eye and has interesting elements. I think it's kind of a puzzle and a game to see how you can put all of those elements together in a photograph and how well you can do it also.
Are they still up at Crabtree?
No, I took them down. That was my first and only art show. And Stephanie and Jeff at Crabtree are so kind. I just went in there one day and was like, hey, I've got photos. Do you mind if I hang them up? And they're like, yeah, bring them on in. And I took them up and hung them up for about a month, and they were very accommodating, very kind. So
that's neat. I was going to ask if you displayed them anywhere else. But
no, I still have most of them. I did sell one. I was real excited. I sold my first print from that showing. So
very nice. Which one did you sell?
It was a picture of, it was a close-up of some yellow roses.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah.
A macro photo, right?
No, this one actually wasn't macro. It was just a close-up using my wide-angle lens. But
okay.
Yeah, it was a photograph of yellow roses that my husband had given me on our 10th anniversary, and I actually still have that bouquet. I dried them.
Oh, right.
Stuck them in a vase somewhere, so.
Very nice.
Yeah, they're not yellow anymore.
No, it's more like a...
brown.
Right.
They're all brown and dried up.
But the love and the sentiment is still there.
Yes.
So was that your first piece of sold photography?
Yes, yeah. And honestly, I haven't really tried too hard, but
right.
It's nice to, be an artist that has sold something.
And are you thinking about any shows in the future, any displays?
I've thought about asking just other entities around town, like coffee shop or another brewery or somewhere, hey, I've got some prints. Do you mind if I hang them up for a while? So hopefully that would go well. We'll see if someone will let me do that.
Right. So that's just more of a side hobby. And it's having to catch you at kind of a shining moment.
Yeah, exactly.
I had this impression I was going to get into, like, oh man, we're going to talk about all these places that she's selling now.
No, you caught me at my pinnacle, and that's it. So.
Right. That's very cool.
Maybe someday. My dream job, they always say if you could do any job you want, my dream job would be to be a photographer for National Geographic magazine and just like travel all over the world and take pictures, not of people,
right,
but of places. So.
Yeah. Do you have a certain subject that's just your favorite to take photos of, or a couple of things that come to mind?
No, I guess not. No, I like to photograph unusual and maybe a little macabre and disasters. Greeley flooded 5 years ago, and those were probably some of the most fun pictures I've ever taken of the flood over on the east side of town. I have won a photography award, and that was for a macro picture of a black widow spider that was upside down on a hose rack in our backyard. Mm. So, strange things I like to photograph, not usual, I think. Children. I know a lot of people like to photograph children. I don't photograph children. Again, they're people.
Right.
So,
why do you think people like to photograph kids?
Well, if they're parents, they love kids. And I don't know.
Their own kids, right?
Yeah, I suppose. I don't know. Kids just have a natural curiosity. They're not as aware of the camera as adults are, maybe. I like photographing dogs, maybe for the same reason. I have easy access to dogs, but they're also not aware of the camera. So they just do what they do all the time. And I've gotten a lot of fun pictures of my pets just because they're ridiculous and
right.
not aware of the camera, basically. Yeah.
Yeah. And the dog, nor the children, when you take a photo, they're like, oh, let me see it. Oh, that's awful. Yeah. It doesn't look good. Don't take pictures of me.
That's called chimping. Here's a little fun fact for you. When you take a picture and you look at it, instead of like staying in the moment and taking more pictures, it's called chimping. And it's highly discouraged in photographic circles.
What part of this is discouraged? What do you mean?
Chimping. Because you're taking yourself out of the moment to take pictures, and you might miss that one shot that's perfect because you're looking at what you just took and deciding if you want to keep it or not. Don't chimp.
Okay, so chimping is looking at a photo prematurely? Or
not necessarily. So you take a picture, right? And then you look at it to see what you've done, right?
Uh-huh.
But in that moment, something else might be happening that you can be taking a better photo of. But because you stopped to look at it, you've lost that moment. And stopping to look at it is called chimping. So it's encouraged just to take as many, because it's digital photography now. You're not going to lose any film or money or time, you know? So just take as many pictures as you can and then go back later and choose what you can.
Yeah,
That's the best.
I assume you take hundreds of photos and glean 1, 2, or 3 out
yeah.
of them.
I would figure out of every 100 photos I take, I keep maybe 5 to 10, maybe.
And even those whittle down to the ones you choose to print or put on canvas or
edit. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So I don't know if it was before digital photography, I don't know if I would be a photographer, because that's very stressful.
That's a whole other process.
Yeah, it's a whole other game. Yeah.
Yeah, you've got film. I mean, unless you're using
art,
Polaroids,
and that's an art in itself to develop film. And I've never done that. And a lot of people say that when photography became digitized, it really lost a lot of that artistry of having to develop the film and having to get it right within that frame, that you couldn't, look at it and go back and take it again, to get certain elements right. And I kind of agree with that to an extent, that when photography became digitized, it really lost a lot of artistry to it.
It wasn't as much a labor of love.
Right.
It got easier.
Right. There's no way I'd have room for, a developing room in my house here, a dark room. So, I mean, that's something you need to be a photographer with film. So,
right.
Yeah.
I guess the flip side is now anyone with a smartphone can take a decent photo, and it opens up access. It doesn't necessarily make the art better, but
opportunity increases opportunities for it to happen.
Right. Because people are not they may not be professional photographers, but they can still capture a moment that could mean something to other people. Or it could just be a sweet selfie that ends up being a Facebook profile picture with a Snapchat filter.
Right.
Who knows?
What phones have enabled is citizen journalism. Since we can take videos and photos wherever we are, and now we as a citizen can tell the story while it's happening as we're there. It was something I saw like on Vice or something recently that just talked about the advent of the citizen journalist because of technology. I think it's really exciting.
Yeah, I mean, anything that happens in a large group is guaranteed to be filmed. I feel like when you see a crowd forming now, half the people have their hands up like this, and they're all recording.
Or at a concert. That's really sad, though, at concerts.
Yes, I agree.
That's a whole other story.
Because I'll take photos at a concert, maybe send, like a couple second Snapchat. I'm guilty. Here we are. Party of one. I don't know what I was going to say there. But what bothers me is looking around and seeing people who are filming entire songs.
Everything, yeah.
Or like 10 minutes at a time, they're just holding their huge phone up. Well, one, selfishly, it's in my way and I can't see. But two, I just think you're missing the moment that you can maybe watch it like a handful of times later on when you're laying down for bed.
Why do people do that? I've always wondered. Why do people video all of this, and do they just post it right away, or do they send it to people? Do they go back and watch it again? Have you ever watched the videos you've made at a concert?
That's what see, this is like a personal bias because I feel like I don't watch them. Do
other people watch them? So you post them?
I'm not sure.
You post them on Snapchat.
Yeah, well, if I take a snap. But let's say I just pull out the phone and I record like a 10-second clip. I don't know what I would ever do with that, honestly, unless it was like a Facebook post or an Instagram video. But I don't know. You're losing the moment of being there in exchange for sharing, and I get that. Mm-hmm. Oftentimes, we want people to see what we're up to in life. We want to share, like, holy crap, I'm here seeing such and such at Red Rocks. Like, I got to share this. But at the same time, it's detracting from your own experience while you're there. So I'm not sure what people do with it.
I'm going to have to start asking, why are you doing that?
Well, what do you think?
I don't know. That's the thing. They miss out on the moment. I think it is part of exhibitionism. They want to show off where they are and what they're doing. But to record like an entire song, yeah, I don't know why anyone would do that. I can understand the clips and the moments and posting the short abbreviated versions, but
right.
I don't know. It's a good research question. Why do you do that?
Yeah, like I myself, I'm guilty. I'll pull it out and film a little bit, but while I'm doing it, I'm already feeling self-conscious. Like, okay, I need to put this away. I need to get back to soaking it in. So
it's important.
I don't know. I mean, it gets back to, is it true for many people that I share, therefore I am, instead of I think? You know, like a lot of us feel a compulsion to post on social media, or even if it's not Twitter or Instagram, it's a text to two of our best friends, like, holy crap, I'm at this concert, you gotta check it out, or like, wish you were here.
So this conversation is interesting to me because there's quite an age difference between you and I grew up in a time when this wasn't an issue. And so to have this conversation of why do people do this and what's the motivation behind it is new for me. Like, you've probably been discussing this for most of your life or aware of it, where for me, I feel like it's a new concept and it's interesting to me for how this is developed in our society now, how everything is so shared and accessible and how it's expected and common. And we have these conversations of why do people do this? Or that didn't happen in the 80s or 90s.
How old were you when you first started, you would say, sharing regularly, if you ever have?
Gosh, I don't know. That's a good question.
Yeah. I know I joined Facebook my senior year of high school. And it was like overnight, I just felt this compulsion to put stuff I did on Facebook.
Instantaneous, huh?
Right, yeah. I created albums and...
Do you feel, though, that everyone does that when they first become involved in a platform? They really get into it for a while, get to know it, use it, utilize it, and then at some point it fades away for them.
I think it might depend on the person and the platform. I have restarted Instagram multiple times, and I just couldn't get into the format. And Twitter has always been fascinating to me, but I've never been huge on Twitter. I don't know why. It just strikes me differently. But
I like Instagram. That's my
your go-to?
platform. Yeah.
Yeah. Why is that, you think?
Because it's just photos. Easy. Post a photo.
Right.
And I'm involved in a project with one of my best friends, too. Her name's Lexi, and we do a photo a day together. And we created an anagram with our names called Laxed Mania. And we did this, the first time we did this was in 2016, and we're doing it again this year, where we just take a picture every day and tag it with that hashtag. The first time we did it, we would have theme weeks. We would be like water. Every picture was about water, or every picture was black and white. And we haven't done that this time, but it's kind of fun to do a photo project with someone like that. So
do you all just alternate the days of which you post? Or?
No, each of us post every day.
Oh, okay.
So it's nice. You can go to just that hashtag, and it's all the pictures we've posted that year.
Right. What is your hashtag in case our listeners are curious?
This year, it's Laxed Mania 2018.
Because you spell that, laxed? What did you say?
Laxedmania, LAXEDMANIA.
2018.
Or is it just 18? Oh, I think it's just 18.
Okay.
Laxedmania 18.
Laxedmania 18 if you want to check it out.
Yeah. And Lexi's a great photographer, too. She's even into more like unusual and strange things than I am, I would say. And some of her photos are just very beautiful and ethereal, and yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And Lexi works at Gold too, right?
She does. You know Lexi. Yeah.
Yeah. I've met her a couple times.
Yes.
So
Goal
perfect
Academy.
segue into Goal Academy,
Yes.
which I worked for a brief period, and I have you to thank for that because you told me about the job position, and I mentioned after I got hired that I knew you, and everyone was vouching. Oh, Amanda, she's great. Like, oh my gosh, you know Amanda. So. Could you explain for people out there first, what is Goal Academy?
Goal Academy is Colorado's largest online blended high school. It's been around for about 10 years. It's been through a lot of change in those 10 years. Most of our students fall under the category of at risk for dropping out. So we have a lot of experience with working with this particular population who really needs that extra help and support and guidance to obtain their high school diploma. I started at Goal in 2010, as a homeroom instructor. I was teaching English. And from there, I moved on to becoming an English specialist. Again, many iterations of goal throughout the years. There's been many titles that have come and gone. For a while, I ran the English department. I ran the social studies department. And then in 2016, I took some time off from goal and just dove head into being a doctoral student at UNC at the University of Northern Colorado. But in February of this year, I was fortunate enough to come back to goal as a data scientist. So again, like I told you earlier, I never thought I'd have the word scientist.
You sound super smart.
I know. Thank you. I don't know. Thank you.
You sound 10 times more accomplished than me.
No. Data scientist. So basically what that is, I've been tasked with looking at the data that Goal has, and Goal has so much data. Like I said, we've been around for 10 years. So we have data on, pass rates and GPA and how many enrollments students have had and how many classes they've passed and all this stuff. And we're gathering different data this year. We're looking at adverse childhood experiences, so different kinds of traumas that our students have gone through. We're looking at their resiliency and using a lot of different measures and surveys for students and parents to fill out. So again, it's even more data that we have to work with. And what I'm really excited about, and one of the reasons that this position was created was because we have such a large student population, we have almost 4,000 students across the state. We want to be able to partner with universities and other research institutions to answer some of the research questions we have. And I know there's a lot of, as on the other end of that, as a researcher, there's that data we want to get to be able to answer these questions that we have. So I'm really excited. I feel like I'm in a really great position to kind of weld these two spheres together, my professional life working at Goal and then my doctoral life at UNC, to take a look at all this data and specifically what I'm looking at for my dissertation. We're looking at these adverse childhood experiences, which are basically different kinds of traumas that people can go through. Having a parent who's incarcerated, living in a household where there's drug and alcohol abuse, having been abused either sexually, emotionally, or physically. And how do those experiences within a person and different combinations of those experiences, how do they correlate with academic outcomes at the high school level? So if a person has this many different adverse experiences in their childhood, what might their academic performance in high school look like? Will they be successful? Will they struggle? Will they do well in math and struggle in reading, or vice versa? So that's kind of the question that Goal is interested in also, as well as UNC as part of my research. And Goal is really very interested in finding out what kind of student we have and how we can help that particular student. And so we're also looking at going and talking to graduates who have been successful, who are leading productive lives, which, is our mission and goal, is to help people become productive citizens. So who are these Goal graduates who have achieved that? And what are they like? And what were they like when they were in high school that helped them be successful? And if we can figure that out, then the next step is, how can we figure out to encourage those attributes and characteristics in the students we have now to help put them on a path for success, if that makes sense.
100%.
Okay, good.
So, 100 billion questions here. Are you going to give surveys to the students, or how will you all find out about their traumatic life experience? So
one measure that we're looking at is the ACE survey, Adversive Childhood Experiences.
How dare you misspeak.
Aversive Childhood Experiences. And this survey was actually developed in 1998. It came out of a study by, I want to say, CDC and Kaiser Permanente, and several researchers. And at that time, they found correlations between 10 indicators of aversive experiences and later on health outcomes in life. And a lot of research has been done on ACEs and physical health, so people who experience a lot of trauma in their childhood tend to have more health problems when they're older, and it can get even It's very specific to the kind of trauma, specific to the kind of health problems they have later on in life. There's also research on these, aversive experiences and mental outcomes later on in life. I'm not finding a lot of information on ACE and academic outcomes. So there is there's research on, traumatic experiences and cognitive ability. So that's kind of related. But I'm hoping that this study, my dissertation that I'm beginning this semester and will hopefully be done with by the end of next December 2019, I hope it'll inform a little bit more about what happens, what kind of correlations does a traumatic experience in childhood have with academic outcomes later on in life. So that's the basis of my research. And, I talk about being a data scientist at Goal and also being a doctoral student, but a lot of it really seems to just mesh together. So that's it's really nice. And I think it's going to help really make an informed study that has a lot of valuable, useful information.
Right. Well, that's no accident. You designed it that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So is that fate or destiny?
I'm not sure. But, so some of your early data is suggesting that the amount of traumatic life experiences does not necessarily affect academic outcomes in high school. No,
I don't have any data yet. Are you talking about my research?
Maybe.
Like literature?
I got confused there.
No.
So
what I found so far, and again, I'm not complete, I haven't done a thorough lit review. So there's
this
probably
is literature review.
Right. What I'm finding though is that there is correlations between adversive childhood experiences and poor cognitive functioning later on in life. Now, of course, cognitive functioning is not the same as academic performance, but they are related. So I would assume, poor academic or cognitive functioning would lead to poor academic performance. But again, you need to have research behind that, right?
Right. And so that's your hypothesis, or that's your prediction. Is
yes.
That,
yes. This is more of an exploratory study. So I'm not so sure I'm making any predictions right now. What I'm really looking at, again, are the profiles. And I'm using this new, and I don't know a lot about it, but I'm approaching this with the concept of a person-centered approach for statistical analysis. So a person-centered approach takes into account many different factors when thinking of or when trying to find associations for outcomes. And it focuses on the person. What is this person's specific profile? So if we're talking about aversive or traumatic experiences, we'll talk about like this person has sexual abuse and physical abuse, and that's their profile. Well, someone else's profile might be this person was emotionally neglected and was also had a parent who was incarcerated. So that would be their profile. So we're looking at what kinds of profiles, what kinds of traumatic experiences and combinations of traumatic experiences correlate with different kinds of academic outcomes, being successful, graduating, remedial courses, that kind of thing.
Right. And this being exploratory is one of the goals to eventually be able to turn around and say, here are some concrete ways we could help students with traumatic experience.
Yes.
Both do well in high school and succeed after.
Yes. Not only that, but to say, here's what we can do for a person who has this specific kind of profile. So to really narrow it in, to identify what particular experiences a person has gone through, to kind of be able to predict how they might perform, and then what are those interventions that we can put in there for those particular, traumatic experiences that they've had.
Right. And so I assume at some point this data will be collected by either you or other staff from Goal?
Right. Well, it's part of the the enrollment process. It's
part of the onboarding.
Right. Yeah. So there will be this information for most students. So.
And are you going to track down graduates or?
Well, that's not part of my dissertation here. That's not part of the study. We're looking in the future. What else can we do? Let's figure out what's going on with our students now. Then maybe what is the next step with what can we do with, figuring out what makes students successful from students who have gone through the program. So.
Yeah. And what led you to this dissertation project combining with your career? Did you just eventually you felt compelled towards this? Or?
Honestly, it was just very serendipitous. It was, I don't know. My old boss called me up one day and she said, there's this position. I would encourage you to apply for it. So I did and went through the process and was fortunate enough to be hired. And the job description fell right in line with research and studying, data scientist. And I had just finished my comps. So I was kind of in limbo. Like I didn't have anything written in stone for what I was going to do for my dissertation. And when I was going through the interview process and the whole hiring process, I kind of put everything on hold for a while because I thought if I am able to get this position as a data scientist, would I be able to combine the two? So I didn't want to jump into my dissertation while I was going through that. And in a way that kind of kicked me in the butt because it did set me behind a bit. I feel like I'm not as far along in my dissertation as I should be because of that. But on the other hand, if I had dove into something that was totally different than what I'm doing at Goal right now, then I would be doing, so much work.
Double the work.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and I also feel with my work at Goal that I'm able to get support from a research institution to help inform my actual job, so I feel like I can do my job better because of that. So it's just a very symbiotic relationship. I feel very, very fortunate to be where I am.
This is like the mastercraft plan.
I didn't plan any of this.
Right, so. But it works because it makes you better at your job. It's an awesome dissertation. From a fellow graduate student, many dissertations can just be, is colloquial a good word, and not have any real-world impact? Yours has potential to possibly change kids' lives.
I hope
and that's more than just a dissertation.
I know, but there's also this part of me, Ivan, that's like, I just want to get this over with, so I'm just going to do whatever, which it kind of is, But even with that said, I am excited about it. I think, like you said, it has the potential to be impactful. And yeah, I'm real excited to see where I am a year from now.
And it might help too because dissertation can be so nebulous. There are no longer any due dates. So sometimes it can be hard to press ourselves.
Oh my God.
I speak as if I'm in the middle of this, but I'm not. I'm just watching other people suffer on the battlefield of dissertation. And so if this is something that charges you when you are driving somewhere and you're going to work with students that you could possibly help, it's a way to stay invested in your dissertation. Like to remind yourself, hey, it's a 150-page paper, but I'm also trying to help if you help someone's high school career, even one student with your dissertation, you've changed somebody's life. And that may seem silly, but if you think about like just pointing someone's life in a 10-degree angle difference. If you extrapolate that 40, 50 years, you're looking at someone's in a different world, and that could be due to you and your...
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. To just help one person would be really nice, right? That's what everybody wants to do in this world, to make a difference, right? Mm-hmm. So
in academia, we focus on getting published or becoming a first author, second author, but...
I'm not going into academia after this.
Okay.
Do you think you will?
I am not sure. I know I want to teach, so teaching is my lifeblood. And right now, I'm teaching intro psych at both UNC in Greeley and Front Range in Fort Collins. And so I'm seeing both worlds, and I think by the end of PhD, I will decide whether I want to teach at a community college and just be an instructor, or whether I feel like doing research.
Be paid very little.
Oh, hey, okay, yes.
Right.
But very little in comparison to K-12 educators, not so much.
Right.
It's all relative, so.
But do you think you'll go into university research level?
Right, so that's the other distinction is, do I want to teach at a community college or do I want to be at a research institution? And I don't know the answer to that question yet.
Right.
Yeah.
I think this sounds terrible, but one thing I've learned through this whole process is that I don't want to continue in research. It's a tough road. And, and I know it's a lot different from being a faculty versus a doctoral student where, you're always fighting for money and writing grants, and you're being pressured to publish like you talked about. And I've kind of realized that that's not for me. It's a very stressful lifestyle, it seems like. And so, I don't know. And then there's the avenue of going, I love teaching too. And I just said the other night that I really missed teaching second grade, stepping out of the classroom. It was a decision I didn't realize I was going to regret the way I have. So, but then there's that other issue of making a living and making money and surviving, and how well are you going to survive? And I would love to go back to second grade and teach again, or kindergarten, but the money's not there. And that's very sad for me, because it's not an easy job. It was a fun job, but our teachers aren't always paid living wages, and so I don't know if I could ever really do that fiscally.
Yeah. Anytime I think about teaching middle school math, I miss it. Mm-hmm. And more than just pay, it is this feeling of being valued by society as a K-12 educator.
Did you feel valued as an educator?
By certain people, but not by the system.
Or by society as whole. I felt.
Right. Like
I feel there's a lot of lip service. Yes, we love our teachers, but no, we're not going to vote for higher taxes to fund them. And I also realize that just throwing money at the problem isn't the solution. But I think teachers lack a lot of support from families at home. Sometimes we don't get the support from the families at home. They don't always necessarily understand what teachers do. And on the same hand, we don't always necessarily understand what's going on at home with the student, right? So I think there's a lot of lack of communication between parties in education, public education. But I guess there's probably a lot of lack of communication in just life in general on any front. So
right, yeah.
But
more love, more communication.
Right.
Coming together. Well, and it varies by state. When I moved from Dallas to Greeley, I took a $7,000 pay cut overnight for the same type of position.
Yeah.
So it varies. It's not uniform. But so if academia is not on the platter for Amanda Jacobs here, what is possibly on the horizon?
I don't know. I love my job right now. Like
data scientist.
Yeah, I've talked about it with my husband. Like when I graduate, then that's just going to be it. I'm done with school and life goes on, and we'll see. I have no plans on changing jobs, so we'll see. The thing about goal is that goal is always evolving and changing too. So I'm a data scientist now. I don't know if I always necessarily will be. I've been in many positions in goal, so this might just be another one of the many things I can help contribute to goal. So I'm excited. There's always something to do and places to go, I think, and I feel very fortunate to have found that path.
And being a data scientist sounds somewhat similar to the research side of academia, yet you're not fighting for grants. You're not you're not having to prove your worth and be up for tenure.
Yes. And you know
get
what?
A consistent paycheck.
You just kind of pointed out all the things that I don't like about research. Because
Yeah.
I love, what are questions I have and how can we figure out the answers, that's an interesting, part of life, research. But all the other stuff that goes along with it,
right?
Man, it really sours it on a lot of levels.
Yeah. I enjoy the research I'm getting into with Dr. Molly Jameson and math anxiety, but there definitely was a question to myself before starting PhD that if I could get away with teaching at community college from now on with just a master's, would I? And I didn't really know the answer to that question. But I could barely get my foot in the door for an adjunct spot, teaching just one class a semester with my master's. And it seems like everybody else at Front Range has a PhD, even though they're not researching. They're just instructors at Front Range.
What's the average income of a community college professor? Do you know?
I don't know, but
I want to say it's around 40 to 50.
Oh, I would say it's like 55.
You think it's higher?
In Colorado.
Okay.
Yeah, that's because I was looking at the Front Range pay schedule. They just published them, and yeah,
okay.
That's about what it seemed like from
That's doable. It's not terrible.
Right. Well, I've never known more than a K-12 educator salary, so to me, 55 sounds like judging.
No kidding. I remember when I was my first year teaching kindergarten. It was actually here in Greeley, and it was, oh my God, like 13 years ago. And I think my pay was like starting out was $24,000 a year. It was, you know, that's not a lot. At the time, though, like you said, well, when you're young, $20,000 seems like a lot of money when you've been a student, you know, but now as an adult, because darn it, I grew up.
I felt like Wolf of Wall Street making 43 grand. I just thought like I was on top of the world and I was untouchable.
Yeah, it's all relative, I guess, you know?
And then now I make less than half of that as a graduate student, and I'm like dreaming of the days. But
are you happy?
Yes.
Yes, see?
Yeah.
That's what matters. And it's a short inconvenience for greater rewards down the road.
Well, I wouldn't even say inconvenience. I consider myself pretty lucky to be teaching at UNC and teaching at Front Range. And I'm nerd alert. I love being in school. And people are like, I have no idea how you could possibly go back to school and write papers and sit in class. And I'm like, because I like it. I find it hard to understand how some of my friends have been working at the same job since they got out of college. And it's just a difference in personality and preference, and well, we enjoy.
I love school too.
Yeah.
Do you want to hear an interesting story about me?
That's why we're here.
Okay. So when I graduated high school, and I'm going to say graduated with quotation marks, I graduated...
Do you care to elaborate on that?
It means I barely graduated.
Okay.
I graduated with the lowest GPA possible that they would still allow you to graduate. And I remember going in to my gymnastics instructor and begging him for a D so that I would get enough credit to graduate.
You failed gymnastics?
Oh, I failed everything. I would go to high school in the morning to find out where the parties were that night, and then I would leave for the rest of the day.
Savage.
My mom got so tired of the school calling her and telling her that I wasn't in school that day that she told them that I was emancipated and to stop calling her. So that worked out well for me at the time. The school didn't bother to check up on if that was really true or not because it wasn't.
Right.
And so all I would have to do was just say I was sick. You know, what are you going to do about it? I'm emancipated. At the time, like I said, I thought it was awesome. But as an adult and an educator now, I'm like, oh my gosh, that was terrible. The school should have looked into that. So yeah, high school was a big joke. I barely graduated. I hated high school. I hated being there. I took a year off after I graduated. I lived in a house behind a record store in Pueblo with 8 gutter punks for a year, and that year changed my life. That's when I decided to go back to school because I knew if I didn't do something different that I was going to come home and I was going to be doing the same thing over and over, living hand to mouth in a dirty, dirty place and not getting anywhere. So I went back to school at Pueblo Community College, and I've never stopped going to school since then. So it's been a long time, but I think I tell people that story who didn't know me back then, who know me now, and a lot of times I get a lot of disbelief.
Right.
Like, yeah, that's not true, but it is. And my dad likes to say that I have been abducted by aliens, and me now is actually just some weird clone that they left in my place. So I don't know.
Is this true?
Maybe.
Can we confirm?
Wouldn't that be interesting?
Might get some more viewers or some more listeners that way.
That would be a whole other podcast, right?
Right. So that year you had spoke about in between, was it an overnight aha moment, or was it a slow creeping?
There was a single moment where I was like, I have to do something different. And it's kind of a terrible moment. Do you want to hear it?
Hey, if you're willing to share.
Okay, so I was 19 years old. I was working as a Mary maid, cleaned houses during the day and came home at night. And like I said, I lived with these like 8 gutter punks, and they were all good guys and fun, and you know, it was just living life.
What do you mean by gutter punk? Just
like there were 12 people who lived in the house. I think there were 12. We would just have shows in the basement every weekend, just these punk bands traveling through town, living out of their van. Everyone just living hand to mouth. Nobody ever cleaned. We had like 12 couches in the living room and a pool table, and it was just constant parties and a lot of drugs and alcohol going on, you know?
Rad.
So I would, at the time, it was amazing, right? But again, as an adult, I'm like, oh, what was I doing? So I came home one day from work, cleaning houses all day, and at the time we had a mouse infestation. Mice everywhere all the time. I remember laying in bed and feeling one run over my legs while I was in bed. And we would set out traps, and every day we would find mice. So I came home this one day, and I go upstairs to my room, and there's a mama mouse and a baby mouse caught in a mouse trap. And the baby mouse is still alive. And I'm just thinking about how terrible this story sounds after I just talked to you about all my research. And now I'm telling you this story about dead mice in a mouse trap. So I run downstairs, and I'm like, tell the guys, there's mice in the mouse trap, and one of them's still alive. And they're like, oh, that's so cool. Let's go get it. And they ran upstairs, and they got the baby mouse and decided to play hacky sack with it. And it was at that moment that I said to myself, wow, Amanda, you really need to do something to not live here anymore. And it was, I think, the following week I went in and submitted my application to Pueblo Community College.
I imagine the moment where the person receiving your application looks up and wonders, what brought you in today? And you're in your head, you're thinking about this half-alive baby mouse. I was not ready for that. Being tossed around as a hacky sack in your 12-sofa living room.
Defining moment.
Yeah.
Defining moment.
So much so, you remember it now.
Yeah.
All this time later.
Yeah. I'm not, I don't keep in touch with any of those guys anymore. I kind of know where they all are, but it's, I was a very different person as a teenager growing up, so.
Right.
I was a goal student. We didn't have goal back then, but if we had, I definitely would have really benefited from what goal had to offer, so.
So, okay, 3 things. First, after you decided that you want to go to community college, but you were still living there, and the time was counting down until it was time going back to school, what was that like?
I moved out.
Oh, you moved out.
Well, actually, my boyfriend and I moved out. I was living there with my boyfriend at the time, and I was like, we have to move out of this house. And so we ended up getting an apartment somewhere else, just him and I. And during that time, I would study, I guess, at night. I remember, like, buying workbooks and working through it, because you have to take entrance exams and to get to community college. So I remember studying and just trying to prepare myself for college. So this is interesting. I've never taken the SAT or the ACT. Because in high school I didn't care. I'm not gonna worry about that. Where's the Kager tonight? ACT. What are you talking about?
It's 8:20. I'm late for leaving.
Right, I know. So I never took the ACT or SAT, and when I applied to get into Pueblo Community College, they didn't require those as an entrance, requirement. I just had to take their exams to find out what my abilities were in reading and math, essentially. And I actually had to take a few remedial math courses that I didn't earn any credit for, just to make up for everything I didn't do in high school.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, to this day, I've never taken the ACT or the SAT. So, which I know is unusual for people in a doctoral program.
And here you are.
And here I am.
Flopping out a dissertation.
I would like to know what I would get on the SAT or the ACT.
Well, if you took it now, it'd be a little skewed. But,
but it would look good.
You're not wrong. So another thing is you had laughed because you juxtaposed this story with your dissertation idea.
Yes.
But I think it gives it more power. Because sometimes the best teachers, in my experience that I've met, the best K-12 teachers were some of the kids who hated school when they were going through it. Because they remember what it was like. And if you can put yourself in that seat and remember what it was like to not be invested in school, I think it makes you more likely and more adept at bringing those types of students in to not like school, but at least participate in it. Get by. So
connect with it, maybe.
Right. And so you remember maybe what it was like to be a goal-ish type student.
Yeah.
And maybe that's what has led you to this point, and you didn't even realize it.
That's very insightful, Ivan.
Well, thank you. The third thing is, I feel like when I say that I'm a PhD student, people make an assumption about me. They think, oh, like PhD student. Especially if I'm back home in Oklahoma, I just feel like sometimes it comes across, I'm almost afraid to say it. And I think it's really good for people to hear that not everyone was born, became a kindergartner, first grade, loved school, straight A's. We just flew through it. We became an undergrad, a master's, PhD. Here we are.
And a lot of people do that. They go straight through to PhD.
Right.
Which is,
Even if they do that, which some people in our program have, that doesn't mean that they were necessarily always good at school or that they've always been a high achiever.
Right.
If you were to listen to a 5-minute life story of everyone in our department at UNC who's a graduate student, I think the average person would be shocked that this group of people has ended up being PhD students. So I just hope that people out there listen to your story and they think, well, next time I meet someone who's like a professor or a PhD, maybe I don't know everything about that person, or even a master's student. You know, I remember when I was just teaching 7th grade math and I met someone who had a PhD, I was always like, oh, okay, like super smart person, everybody watch out, you know? So I was guilty of it too.
But are you still like that? I think if I've learned anything in this whole process is that anyone can do it. It's just a matter of putting in the time and effort.
Right.
Right?
I've told people, no joke, that I think that graduate degrees, in a way, are easier than undergrad.
How?
I think it's less... So undergrad, think about it. You got 5 classes that meet at minimum 2 times a week. Plus you got homework assignments in between most of those classes. In graduate school, you meet once a week. And when you have assignments, you have a week to do it. So it's more nebulous.
Right.
You kind of have to kick your own butt into gear. But it's less time.
Did you have a job as an undergrad?
I did, yeah. Well, at first, when I started college, I was working in a veterinarian hospital. And then the second half, I was working for housing on campus at Oklahoma State. So yeah, I was working, and I was so busy. And I mean, I'm busy and overwhelmed now. But I mean, if I charted the amount of hours per week I put in just my classes for PhD and just classes for undergrad, I think graduate work would be less.
Maybe.
Undergrad is a juggle fest. I mean, 4 or 5 classes every semester. You got assignments rolling at you at least once a week, sometimes 2-3 times a week. Undergrad is hard. College is hard.
When I was an undergrad, I worked at an assisted living facility, and I worked 40 hours a week, 4 to midnight. And I would go in at 4 o'clock and I would make dinner. There were 10 people, 10 elderly residents in my house, and I would make dinner for them. And then I'd do the dishes, and then I would help one of them with whoever's night it was, their bath, give them out medicine, clean a room, do a little vacuuming. I'd give a snack. And then at 8 o'clock, I'd have all my work done. And from 8 until midnight, I would do my homework. And that's how I made it through my undergrad working full time, is wow. I literally...
I didn't work full time.
And I don't know, I couldn't have done it if it wasn't for that job. But I feel, again, very blessed that I had this job that they essentially paid me to do my homework, because I just I needed to be there from 8 to midnight, you know? So, and they didn't care if I had all my tasks done. So, yeah. And
people don't believe me that in high school I had hair that touched my shoulders. I hated school. I hated everybody. I thought most teachers were assholes, and I joined an AP history class, and I didn't give 2 shits about this class. It was supposed to be the advanced class. I didn't even sign up for the test at the end of the year. I just took that class because my friend was in it. Mm. And I just wanted to goof off with my friend. Yeah. That was my senior year.
That's high school. You want to goof off with your friends.
Right. And people are surprised to hear that. I was very anti-school. But what's funny is from middle school, there were 2 classes that I never joked around in. And that was math, which I ended up being a math teacher, and that was psychology, which is the program
and here you are.
That we're in now. Yeah, and so are these coincidences? I don't think so.
So when you go back home and you see your friends that you went to school with through high school, and that, are they surprised that you are a grad student now pursuing your doctorate?
Well, most people from high school I stayed friends with. I'm very lucky to still be in contact with like 10 to 15 people I never lost touch with from high school. So they know that I've slowly been rising through education. So, yeah. It's more, when I was talking about the reaction from people back home, it's more like acquaintances or like co-workers of my parents or like distant family members who haven't kept up with me.
Right.
So, and I just feel like most people think that if you were to tell people that you are in a PhD program, most people would expect and assume that the assumptions would be good. But in my experience, a lot of times I get kind of a distant reaction. So now when I tell people what I'm doing with my life, I just say, oh, I'm still going to school. That's all I say.
And do you find that people ask more about that?
They don't. If they do, then I know they care enough. Yeah. And if they don't, then that's fine. I don't need to.
Right.
I don't need to sit around and profess like Socrates about what I'm studying.
Right.
If people want to know, they will ask, and if not, then not. So, yeah. Have you had these same experiences, or do you feel like this is a completely alien concept?
There have been sometimes people are interested in what I'm studying, but I get what you're saying, and I agree. I think it's almost easier just to be like, oh, I'm back at school. You know, moved to Greeley to finish. I often say, we moved to Greeley so I could finish school, is what I say. And sometimes they'll say, oh, what are you working on? You know, or they'll just be like, oh. And then I assume that they assume I'm working on my bachelor's or something, you know, because think about the people that I went to school with or hung out with. You know, most of those people I don't think pursued advanced degrees. So at least I would be surprised.
Right.
Sometimes you come across people you used to hang out with, and you are very surprised about what they're doing. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not so good. So
the Amanda Jacobs that was watching a half-dead baby mouse be played hacky sack with. What if you went back and you passed her a note and said, "You will complete your PhD someday"?
That girl probably wouldn't even know what that meant.
Yeah.
I'm not kidding.
Is that a drug, or like what are we talking about?
Yeah,
right?
That girl was an idiot. Idiot.
But that's surreal to reflect and think on. You're the same person. You know, there's no new ghost in the house.
Do you ever think about if you could go back and tell yourself some advice, at what age or what time, what would that advice be?
I need 2 days to reflect on this one. I don't know. Do you?
I do. And I think...
You've thought about this.
I think a lot about how I would change what I did growing up. I had a good childhood. I mean, I turned out okay. Everything's fine. But there's just a lot of things...
Up for debate, I'll say.
There's a lot of things I would have done differently. But of course, knowing now what I know now and not then. But I think I would tell like 14-year-old Amanda to not worry so much about what other people think. You know? And I probably even have to tell myself at 42, don't worry so much about what other people think.
Yeah.
You know?
Why do you say that?
Because
do you feel like that was a driving force?
As a young person, yes.
Yeah.
Very much so. I cared a lot about what people thought of me, and that influenced a lot of the decisions and behaviors I engaged in. Now, not so much socially, but professionally, I find myself asking, gosh, you know, what is this person at my job thinking about me? How should I respond to that? Because I don't want to look foolish, and I want to be helpful, and I want to be successful, you know, in my career. That's very important to me. So that's where I kind of focus that energy now, worrying about what people think about me. In my social world, I hopefully have outgrown that somewhat. You know, my friends are my friends, and the people I hang out with are the people I love and who love me. So...
And, you know, you feel valued by proxy that you all are hanging out.
Yeah.
And you're spending time together.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, because I think as we get older, when we choose to allocate our time, that becomes a bigger deal than when you're 16.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I don't know. I'm sitting here thinking, the first thing that comes to mind about my life trajectory is that I've pinballed around so much. I have had some of the most random rap sheet of jobs.
Yeah. Yes, you have. I agree with that. But what great experiences, what a variety of experiences and knowledge that is brought to you, right?
Right. It makes my resume look interesting. And I when I applied...
Well, it makes you interesting. It's not just your resume.
Well, I don't know about that. But when I applied to PhD, self-disclosure here, I didn't get into many schools. And I think one of those was when they looked at me on paper. I looked risky because I've bounced around a lot. I mean, they're looking at a person who didn't have the normal pedigree of a graduate student and who had also been a teacher in 2 different states, had been a school bus driver.
But that's becoming more... I think that variety of experience and the jumping around is becoming more normal, though. Don't you think that's
what I thought when I applied,
yeah.
And the feedback I got back said otherwise. I think.
Really,
yeah. And I don't know if it was just the thing about graduate school is it's a competitive, like fishbowl environment where an X amount apply and then maybe 10 get in.
You get me thinking that you applied for several different schools with uncertain results. Like you didn't know what was going to happen when you applied. So you were taking a risk. When I applied, I only applied to UNC. And I did that because I knew I could get in. So think about how much more experience and character maybe you've built because you've taken all of those risks and have been denied or turned down than someone who didn't take a risk on that. So... Anyway, I know that's a side note. I just want to commend you for taking risks because not everyone does, and that's a brave thing to do, right?
Appreciate it, yeah. I think if I would go back, this is not a good answer, and I'm not feeling it that much, but it's the only thing I have on my palate right now, and that is I would tell younger me, don't stop dreaming. I had so many times in my life when I was doing things I loved, and I shut them down because I didn't think it was realistic to do so. Like when I went into Rogers State University right out of high school, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I knew things I loved, which was psychology, but I didn't think that I could ever be someone with a master's degree. I didn't think that was in my pathway. So I just thought, oh, I'm not destined for that. So I just went into business. And I never knew. I also loved filmmaking. I've made hundreds and hundreds of films with great friends back home. Nick Erdogan, shout out, also podcaster.
Are they on YouTube? Because I'd love to watch them.
Some. But yes, we'll say that off air. But I shut that down for my studies as an undergrad because I didn't think that I was going to be successful at it. And I don't know.
So did you make a choice at that time to pursue your graduate studies versus pursuing being a filmmaker?
This was sophomore year of undergrad, so I was 19 when I decided no film in my future. And think about it, like if you want to succeed in film, at least back then, that would be 2009, 2010, you would have had to move to New York City, Chicago, or LA. And both Nick and I would have had to do that, and just, we're both Oklahoma guys living outside Tulsa, Oklahoma. That just, what? Like, that seems so foreign to us.
Well, did you ever differentiate between pursuing it as a career and pursuing it as a hobby?
We did it as a hobby for years, but eventually, we got older and it split. Especially when I moved junior year to Oklahoma State University in Stillwater. Then we lived 2 hours apart, and we made a couple more videos, but it wasn't the same. And that was the ending of a great era of making videos. And
better to have loved and lost than never loved at all, right?
That's right. So heart goes out to Nicholas Erdogan out there. But I don't know. I might have to come back on that question.
So, as an add-on to that,
I just don't feel like that's even a good answer. I'm sitting here just thinking, like, that's not even my answer.
But think about this now, and I think this is a tougher question. What would your 40-year-old self say to you now? What would your 60-year-old self say to you now? Because I think that about that question more than I do what would I tell my younger self. I think more about what would my older self tell me now. And that's hard. That's hard to think of, right?
You don't know what you don't know. And you think about yourself back at 16 and how radically different things are now. And you can see the past with a
2020?
Sort of, yeah, like a murky crystal ball, because memory is so subjective. But
that's true, yes.
I mean, I just try to think, enjoy the journey. That's why I think, because like working 3 part-time jobs and being a student right now, it is easy to be stressed and it's easy to feel like you're in constant panic mode. Mm-hmm. But I think 40-year-old me would say, calm the hell down. You signed up for this. I literally signed up, and this is my dream. That's what I wanted to do. So shut the hell up that you're freaking out. And enjoy it, because guess what? You always have a choice. That's why, I mean, what do you think 60-year-old Amanda is going to say?
I'm afraid of what she would say to me. I don't want to think about it.
Well, okay, so if you don't want to think about it, then that might indicate that you are suspicious there are things you should be changing.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Uh-oh. So you think you think you know some things that 6-year-old Amanda would say.
See, and this is why I think this is the more interesting question, because it gets you to examine where you are in life now and if you're satisfied with that.
Right.
Whereas if you're just going back, hey, 14-year-old Amanda, don't be so dumb, that's easy to do. But to think about what would my future self say to me now, that takes some really intense examination of the self, I think, and that can be hard.
Yeah. Are you comfortable with those responses?
No.
So there are things.
There are things, but I also believe that there's a time and a place for every battle, and right now that is not the time or place. You know what I'm saying?
Well, I don't know what you're alluding to, but I know that you're giving me mystic eyes.
Right. Well, it just, there's things in my life I'd like to improve, but right now, because I'm so focused on work and school, it's difficult to focus on that. Basically, I guess, is the underlying thing. So maybe when I graduate, when things have settled down, I can focus more on those areas of my life I'd like to change.
Do you feel like 60-year-old Amanda will understand that you took time? Or will she have wished that you had tackled them? No,
one thing I've learned as I get older is that the older I get, the more forgiving and laid back I become. And I'm not quite where I want to be yet, but I'm a hell of a lot better than I was when I was 22 or 23, right?
Right.
Progress. So I think when I'm 60, I would hope that I feel that there are fewer big deals in life that really aren't, big deals, that not everything is crazy and insane, and it's just okay to be relaxed and take things as they are.
Right.
That's what I'm working towards anyway.
Working towards being relaxed.
Right.
But also in the future, tackling some things.
Yes.
Right. So it's a dichotomy. It's two different things.
Isn't it always?
Right. I think it's 100 things, but...
That's more than a dichotomy.
Right. 100otomy. I don't know what that's called. People with more education than myself.
I'm sure there's a term for it.
Right. A problem, too, with thinking about what advice we'd give to our former selves is I initially start thinking about the domino effect of, well, if I tell myself something, I could like mess it up, I could fuck it up and send 16-year-old me into a place I actually would be less happy than I was today.
And then you wouldn't be the person you are. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's that argument, don't regret anything because everything has made you who you are today. And if you like who you are today, then it's awesome.
Right.
And I do like who I am. I don't know. But I guess this is what it hinges on, is going back and instilling all the knowledge you have into that younger person, which is impossible. Like I can't make my 14-year-old self understand all the knowledge and information and life experiences and wisdom that I have now as a 42-year-old. Like there's no way to convey that, and that's really what I'm wanting to do. Mm-hmm. Hey, 14-year-old Amanda, have all of this knowledge so that you make better decisions as you become 15 and 16 and 17. The way you get to that knowledge is by making all those mistakes and doing all those dumb things and coming home to dirty houses where people play hacky sack with dead mice. You know, that's...
I wasn't ready for that. I thought I was. I did not know where that was going.
It's a good story.
You think about this. The advice that you would give 14-year-old Amanda only happened because 14-year-old Amanda acted the way that she did.
Yeah.
So the advice that you're giving yourself is born out of what you already did.
So then it would, like, if I gave myself that advice and I changed my trajectory, then it would never happen and I'd never have that knowledge.
Right. You would give a different 14-year-old Amanda different advice.
Maybe not as valuable. I guess we're damned if we do and we're damned if we don't, right?
Well, so here's what I've kind of always thought. No one writes the rule book. No one writes the script for life, period. Like, you can always get advice from older people. And I think so many people run into this where it's like, this person told me 10 years ago, and I never believed them. But holy shit, I called them on the phone today because I now believe what they told me.
You were right.
Right. And so what I imagine life is like walking on a path that is... it's formulating and coming to existence as you step. There is no way to look ahead. You can always turn around and look back, but it's impossible to look ahead. And therefore, it's really hard to predict how you're going to step and which way to step because there's no guide and it literally doesn't exist yet. And there's no 1 hour later Ivan that can turn around and say, hey bro, come on, this way.
But don't you think
you just have to guess?
But aren't there educated, informed guesses?
Sure, but...
Isn't that better than just guessing blindly?
Yes, but I also feel like you're throwing a paper airplane in a hurricane because the randomness of life and chance, probability.
So here's something Jesse and I have been talking about lately. What's the difference between fate and destiny?
All right, hold on. So let's fill people in. Jesse is Amanda's
husband.
Yes. And they're both from Pueblo, right?
No. Jesse's not from Pueblo. He's from Canyon City.
Canyon City. Okay.
Right.
And now they both.
Yes, now
we're NoCo.
We're from here. Yes.
Right.
And we actually met on a blind date set up by our grandmothers. That's a fun story too.
Okay, can you tell the Cliff Notes version of that before we get back to...
Yeah, our grandmothers went to high school together, and at a reunion, they discovered that they both had grandchildren that were similar in age and single. So my granny called one day and said, I hope you don't mind, but I've given your number to a stranger. I'm like, sure. And then I'm thinking, who's going to call a girl who he got his number from his grandmother? But Jesse did. And that was 17 years ago. And we've been married 13 years now. So,
wow.
Yes. But in the last few days, we've been talking about the difference between fate and destiny. And I think there's a difference. That fate, you don't choose. You don't get to decide what happens. It's what's going to happen. And I'm not even necessarily saying it's predetermined. It's just what happens. That's fate. Whereas destiny, you can design. You can choose. You can choose to go to school to become this person in a career. That's your destiny. You've chosen that. You can take actions to fulfill your destiny. Whereas your fate just kind of happens and you have no control over it. That's my...
So you're saying like destiny is the future that was designed for you because that's the way you are, and fate is where you end up because of random chance?
Yes, fate is random chance, but destiny is engineered by the choices you make.
Okay, so but there's no intelligent maker in the machine.
No.
It's that basically like who Amanda wants to be, and how she acts will lead her to her destiny.
To my fate.
To your fate.
Right.
Well, I'm totally mixed up now. I thought fate was random chance, right?
Right. But destiny, I'm talking about the conscious choices you make. And what you decide to do and what paths you propel yourself down is what is your destiny. Where fate is just, it's going to happen no matter what you do.
And which do you think it is?
Can't it be both?
It could be. But that seems like hindsight bias to me. Once you reach the end point at fate, then you're like, oh, well, yeah, this is the way it should have happened.
Damn hindsight bias.
Right. Well, because now... All right. If random chance, if I had to predict my fate in life, I feel like I'd be less likely than to try to determine my destiny. Because destiny, I have an informed assumption about where I could end up based on my tenacity, my personality, my passions, my hobbies, my propensity to travel. Whereas fate, I mean...
I guess fate can be influenced by destiny, right? But I think maybe fate overall is like a bigger bubble that has outreaches that you'll never be able to touch and influence. Whereas destiny, and I'm sorry for those of you who can't see me using my arms right now because they're flailing all over the place, but destiny would be within the smaller sphere where you have more influence and reach towards, which in turn influences fate, but you can't ever really touch fate itself. Does that make sense?
This kind of sounds like the Socratic form, and how fate is like the ultimate truth, and that you could glimpse it for a moment, but you'll never really know it.
Maybe.
And destiny is kind of like the road to get there.
Yeah, I could see that working.
I
don't know much about what you just said, Socratic something or another,
right.
But I can.
Okay, so the story is that there's a person in a cave. I just learned this from Professor Woody, who's a total genius.
Yes, I agree with that statement.
Yeah, Dr. Woody at UNC is a marvel of a person. Okay, so you're sitting in a cave, and you are looking at the wall, and you see these shadows. And you see shadows of people walking by, and a horse walking by, and you've been watching that wall your entire life. So that's all that you know exists. You think that's the world. You're like chained up basically. And so for you, that's the world. That's truth. So Socrates said that that's the majority of what people think. That's like the level of truth they're willing to go to. But imagine the person in the cave. Two things. One, they take off the shackles and they turn around and they see for the first time that it's not shadows on a wall they're experiencing. It's the reflection of actual horses and actual people.
So they'd see the horse for the first time.
Yes, and they're saying that's closer to a real truth in the universe. These are truths that kind of transcend opinion, they transcend culture. These are things that we would all agree are true. And then it gets to the form of truth, which the only reason you're able to perceive the horse walking by or the human walking by is because of the sun. And so you look up at the sun and you see the truth for what it is for the first time. The thing that is lending you both able to see the physical horse in the man and the reflections on the cave. And he said, much like the sun, you can't look at it long. If it could even be said, you could see it. And the point was, there are these ultimate forms, ultimate truths that exist, but we may never be able to truly understand them. And so that's kind of what I meant by fate.
Yeah.
Is almost like this is there, but we may never experience it, and we may not know it until we catch a glimpse of it at the end of the road.
That makes sense. I like that.
Yeah. I'd never heard of it before until about a month ago.
I'll have to look more into that, but I like that.
Yeah, apparently it's really famous. It's like a really famous...
in philosophy?
Yeah, it's the philosophy theory of form from Socrates.
I'll have to look into that.
So,
interesting.
Hopefully our listeners have not fallen asleep by this point in the conversation.
I have a cousin who's getting a PhD in philosophy, so...
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, they're probably like, I thought we were talking about photography, and now we're talking about...
It's all related.
Socrates looking at the sun.
It's all related.
Yeah, I was taking notes on macro photography, so... Yeah, well, we are here way past time, so if for any reason people want to reach out, ask you questions, they know about your Instagram.
Yes.
How else would some of our listeners reach out if they want to know any more about your photography, your dissertation or your data scientist role?
Well, my Instagram, I actually have 2 accounts. My Laxed is my daily photo, and then, or that's my hashtag, but that's under the Amanda Jacobs Instagram. And then I also have another Instagram called The Dogs at Our House, which is a lot of fun. It's all about the dogs at our house. Ivan's looking at them right now. Three mongrels outside. I take a lot of photos of them.
They're cute.
Yes, they're good dogs.
They're very different dogs.
Yeah, they're all rescue dogs from various organizations around the state. They're all mutts. So, and then if you do have any questions or anything, you can reach me at my email, which would be amanda.r.a.jacobs@gmail.com.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Complex.
I know. It was dumb. I should go back and change it, but it's too late now.
And if you have a parting word for people who have been sitting there thinking, what would future me tell me today? Or what would me today tell past me? What's a parting sentiment you want to leave people with?
I don't know. Maybe we shouldn't be asking ourselves that question so much. Maybe we should be asking ourselves, what should I be telling myself right now?
What should me today tell me today?
Yeah.
I like it. We'll end on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I've had a lot of fun.
Oh, yeah. I want to say a special thank you to Russell Isaac Long, the man responsible for all the music used here at the NoCo. Are you looking for a little bit of bonus content in addition to the regular episodes on the show? Look for us out there on the interwebs on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, all at the NoCo. Until next time, peace!